So I found this book on the street. You know how you're walking down the street and there's a box full of books and something catches your eye. Well, this is a book by Brad Steiger called Miracles of a Mother's Love, and I immediately grabbed it. Yeah, many of you know that I'm a Divine Mother devotee, and I'm familiar with Brad Steiger, and I have a little AI description, because I just put in the search engine, how many books did Brad Steiger write? I knew he was a prolific author, but according to Google AI, Brad Steiger, born in 1936, died in 2018, was a prolific author who wrote or co-authored over 170 books during his career. Some reputable publishing and retail sources such as Simon & Schuster and Audible credit him with over 175 books. His work was primarily focused on the paranormal, UFOs, and the unexplained, with more than 17 million copies of his books in print. Notable works and collaborations: the Real Unexplained series, a massive collection of paranormal research, with some books like Real Ghosts, Restless Spirits, and Haunted Places becoming his most read titles. Co-authored over 50 books with his wife, Sherry Hanson Steiger, and she actually collaborated with him on this book with the Miracles of Mother's Love book. He also wrote biographies of Hollywood icons such as Greta Garbo, Judy Garland, and Rudolph Valentino. In addition to his books, he published more than 2,000 articles on paranormal themes beginning in 1956. I've always wondered how people could write like dozens and dozens of even hundreds of books. It's taken me years just to finish my first book, which is almost finished. But of course, I'm not just writing all day, every day, and I'm doing a lot of other stuff. But so what I'm going to do is I'm claiming fair use for this, because this is going to go up on YouTube, and this is only for educational purposes. I'm not making any money off this. And I am going to read the first story from this book, and then I'm just going to open the book randomly and see what else comes up. So, Miracles of a Mother's Love. True stories that celebrate the special bond between mother and child. And I'll see how I feel. I might share some stories about my mother, who I had a very strong bond with. But let's see how this goes. Get to the first story. There's a long introduction. Okay, this is the first story. This is a story about how the gift of a mother's love saved lives of another mother's children, and how a very good, very obedient son was the instrument of deliverance. 29-year-old Alex Davis was riding with his mother, Ann, near their home in Cleveland, Ohio, when they saw a two-story house engulfed in flames. Good neighbors and citizens, the Davises pulled over to see if they could be of any help. A desperate Teresa Montgomery, one of the tenants, told Alex and his mother that her 5 babies, together with teenager Sedona Cummings, were still inside the blazing inferno. The pleas of the anguished mother touched Ann Davis deeply. Perhaps her son Alex would save the children. Of course, she was concerned for the safety of her own son, but she simply could not bear to think of those 6 children dying in the flames. Alex could actually see some of the children standing at the second-floor windows. He offered to run into the house, race up the stairs, and carry the children to safety, even though Teresa informed him that the stairs were on fire. Alex took a deep breath, pulled his hooded coat over his head, and without another moment's hesitation ran into the flaming building. Aware that smoke inhalation could kill him quicker than the fire, Alex dodged the flames as he raced up the burning stairs. Once on the second floor, he got down on all fours and crawled around in the billowing clouds of smoke, groping for the children. When he touched the smallest ones, he pulled them into his arms and told the older ones to follow him carefully down the stairs. The heat and smoke were choking us, and flaming parts of the house were falling all around us, Alex later reported, but we got out. When Alex staggered out of the hellish inferno with the children in his arms, neighbors cheered. Teresa Montgomery sobbed gratefully as she took count of her babies. Alex had saved the lives of 4 of her children, ages 2 to 7, and 13-year-old Sedona Cummings, but Teresa's 10-month-old baby, Walter, was still somewhere inside the fast-collapsing, flame-consumed house. "Go back," a somber Ann Davis told her son. "You have to go back and save baby Walter." This time the flames and the smoke were much worse. Somehow Alex again managed to climb the burning stairs to the 2nd floor. But once he had achieved that seemingly impossible goal, he found that he was blinded by smoke. For moments that seemed like tortured hours, Alex crawled around from room to room until at last his searching fingers felt what seemed to be a couch, then what he believed to be a diaper, and then they closed around what he knew for certain was a baby's leg. Alex could tell that little Walter was unconscious but still alive. He carefully placed the infant inside his coat and braced himself for another run down the fiery stairs. Once again, Alex Davis scored a touchdown of the most heroic kind. He had saved all 6 children in the house from a terrible death by fire. None of the children were injured. Paramedics, did I skip a page? Paramedics quickly revived baby Walter with oxygen, and Alex himself suffered only minor burns. Jonathan Parries of the Cleveland Fire Department declared Alex Davis a bona fide hero and stated that it was certain that those 6 children would have died without his selfless actions. Alex responded that he had no choice but to do as he did. Those people were his neighbors, and besides, he added, "My mother told me to." Beautiful story. So I am just going to hold the book and ask God to give me the next story, and then we'll see if maybe we can even... Okay, we're stopping here. And this is right in the middle of a story. And so this is what comes up. When his mother passed away on February 25th, 1999, Roger Emerson was left with feelings of unresolved guilt in addition to his grief. For the last 2 or 3 years of her life, Mom, Estelle Emerson, had been behaving in a very strange and irritating manner, making it very difficult to be patient with her, Roger said. At first, my sister Lois and I thought Mom had Alzheimer's or some other mentally degenerative affliction. She seemed very absent-minded, and her memory was terrible. It seemed as though she had historically revised every major event in our lives to make my sister and I appear to be wretched children who were always trying to take advantage of our parents. I suppose the most difficult aspect of Mom's personality change was that she has always been so pleasant and understanding when we were children, Roger continued. She had always been the perfect mom, as ideal a mother as the ones on television. Beaver and Wally Cleaver had nothing on us. Our mom could outmom Barbara Billingsley or even Donna Reed. And then Roger explained it seemed as though their once perfect mother, who never complained and who was always pleasant, literally changed overnight into a fault-finding, nitpicking, never satisfied, always irritable mother. Although I know it troubled her, I stopped asking my kids to see their grandmother. Trying to get light on this. Roger said, I just didn't want them to have memories of their grandmother as some totally unpleasant person. My kids, Meg, 3, and Derek, 5, were younger than Lois's daughter, Chris, who was 17 and could form some perspectives about Grandma Emerson's deteriorating mental condition. My wife, Carrie, had refused to visit months before, for she seemed particularly to provoke a foul mood and nasty insults from Mom, who accused her of having allowed herself to become pregnant to snare me. In actuality, we had been married 2 years before Derek was born. Carrie, however, remained understanding and encouraged me to visit Mom as often as I wished. A medical examination ruled out Alzheimer's, so Lois, who was nearly 6 years older than Roger, and who had even more cherished memories of a loving, cheerful mother, insisted that perhaps her mother had a brain tumor, or Roger had resigned himself to considering maybe their mother had suddenly begun to reveal a mean streak, a nasty side of herself that she had somehow managed to keep hidden until their father's death 4 years ago. You know, her dramatic personality change occurred about a year after Dad's death, Roger reminded his sister. Maybe she had this side of herself all these years, but Dad's tranquil nature kept her balanced. Lois readily conceded that their father had an exceptionally and well-balanced personality, but she remembered her parents as very evenly matched in terms of how their endearing personal characteristics. It has to be a brain tumor, she argued. What else could alter my mother's personality in such a manner? Roger's friend, Dr. Peter West, a psychologist at the local college, advised him to be more accepting of his mother's change of character. Some folks simply did become a bit more crotchety and patient with younger people, especially their own children, as they got older. Roger had to remember that his mother was 82, and perhaps his father's death did have a great deal to do with her becoming angry and upset with the world. From what I understand, Dr. West pointed out, your folks were married before they were out of their teens, and as a couple of scared but adventuresome kids, they left their small town in Nebraska and moved to a suburb of Chicago to seek their fortunes, so to speak. They lived and worked hard together for 10 years before they had Louis, their first child. Your parents were a solid unit devoted to one another, except for the years when your mother stayed home to look after the kids and your father went off to work. They were never apart for more than a couple of hours. Neither one of them had any hobbies or activities that took them away from each other. They were completely realized and completed in one another. After all those years of such bliss and happiness, she could very well now feel robbed, cheated. The great love of her life had been taken from her, leaving her with 2 kids who visit her only when it is convenient and who act upset because their mom is no longer June Cleaver. Roger admitted that his friend's advice made some kind of sense, so he tried to approach his mother with a new understanding, but it was hard to be patient when Mom's once even disposition had been replaced by a temperament that was totally irritated and could blaze forth at a moment's notice into awful temper tantrums over the most minute of circumstances, he said. And then the awful moment came one Sunday afternoon when Roger was visiting his mother at their family home. I should have waited until some afternoon later in the week, he recalled. I had a terrible headache and felt a miserable cold coming on. To make matters worse, it had been a horrible week at work, and I had a major presentation to deliver the first thing in the morning. When Mom lashed out at me for having broken her favorite brush with the mirror on the back, I wondered why I was wasting my precious time with her hateful self when I should be home working on my notes. She kept screaming at me for being so disrespectful of her personal possessions, on and on. Now, you must understand that I had broken that mirror when I was 6 years old, and I had tearfully and profusely apologized to Mother, who at the time had accepted the accident as totally inconsequential in the flow of life occurrences. When she kept on and on with it all these many years later, I lost my temper. Roger said that he struck back with some nasty words and some cruel barbs of his own. He called his mother crazy and threatened to place her in a home. With that, he stormed out of the house, shouting back over his shoulder that he might never return, that he didn't want to see her ever again. And I never did see her again, Roger said solemnly, at least not in life. 2 weeks later, Mom died of a brain tumor. On the night following his mother's death, Roger lay in awful sleeplessness, tortured with thoughts of recrimination. There had been so many good times in his earlier life with his mother. Why couldn't he have allowed those memories to have sustained him during the trying days of his mother's tragic personality change? Death can be a very stern teacher, Roger said. The Grim Reaper presents too many lessons that are too late to correct. I now saw clearly how faulty human judgments can be. I perceived with great sorrow how a quickly uttered word can leave an indelible impression on the psyche. Most of all, I realized how Mom's irascibility late in her life was due to some unfathomable cause that lay beyond the rational mind and its compulsion to find reasons for everything in life. I felt a terrible guilt for not having had the strength of soul to remain patient with Mom. So they would not disturb his wife, who had somehow managed thus far to remain asleep as he tossed and turned. Roger went downstairs to sit quietly with his painful thoughts in the darkened living room. I had just begun to sob aloud in my despair when I distinctly felt a kiss on my left cheek, Roger said. I turned quickly, expecting to see Carrie come to comfort me, and I saw the faint form of Mom standing beside me. She was smiling, and she looked very much the way that I had remembered her when I was a little boy of around 6 or 7. I sat bolt upright in my recliner chair, and Mom's lovely smiling image leaned forward and kissed me once again on my left cheek. I felt that kiss warm and loving so vividly as I had felt it in her living form, and then Mom's image vanished. But her smile and her kisses had told me that she too was sorry about our strained relationship during her final years. She had forgiven me for my harsh words. In the place, the dimension, the heaven, where she now was, she had received a much larger perspective. And now I too must forget about those awful times in her declining years and remember only the wonderful times that we enjoyed in the past. And knowing that she had forgiven me for my impatience and cruel outbursts, I must now forgive myself. I am well aware of how many people in our materialistic and skeptical world will explain away the kiss of forgiveness that I received from the spirit of my mother. But for me, the sensation of that kiss was too real, too genuine, too filled with the pure gifts of a mother's love for me to doubt. Let me see. This one looks... Oh, this is a short one. So I'm going to read this one. Now I'll share some stuff about after when my mother died. It was a year ago. So this is a whole nother story. She may not have believed in miracles before that fateful day in 1996, but when Michelle Marquetan's 23-year-old son, David, fell from a 7th floor window and survived, she knew the sky had to have been filled with angels. 23-month-old son. So 23 months, that's like 2 years. Little David had been playing near an open screen window when he suddenly leaned against the mesh and it gave way. Becky, his 3-year-old sister, came running into the kitchen where their mother was working and screamed that the baby had just fallen out the window. Fell 7 stories. Michelle was scared to death when she entered the room and saw the ripped screen. Then when she rushed to the window to look down, she was horrified when she saw David lying on the ground 7 floors below. Instinctively, she cried out to God not to take their son from them. David Sr., who was outside working on their car, was puzzled by the sound of a thud about 30 feet away from him. When he investigated and saw his precious son lying motionless, blood trickling from his mouth, he picked David up and began crying. Miraculously, little David was still breathing. There was at least some hope that he might live if he were rushed to a hospital and received immediate medical treatment and most likely serious surgery. A trauma team was standing by when the ambulance arrived at Pittsburgh's Children's Hospital, ready to rush David into surgery. But the miracle was not yet complete. Dr. Edward Barksdale Jr., a pediatric surgeon, had expected to face a tragic death of a child, or at least a child who had suffered severe life-threatening injuries. However, when he examined David, Dr. Barksdale found that neither likelihood presented itself. The little boy, who had fallen 7 stories to the ground below, had suffered only a slight concussion, a few fractured ribs, and some bruises. David's father expressed his gratitude to his son's guardian angels, and the mother said she now believes that miracles do most certainly occur. Dr. Barksdale agreed. There can be no other explanation, he told reporter Chris Rodell, National Enquirer, August 15, 1996. It's a miracle this boy is alive. So, many of you know that my mom died about a year ago, and I had spent 3 days with her a couple weeks before she died, and she was very uncomfortable, and for the last couple of years of her life, she was just kind of had this attitude, why am I still alive? I don't really feel well. And I caught her taking Tylenols, and she was like just taking Tylenols every day. I said, Mom, you're not supposed, this is for like temporary relief, or you can't take Tylenol every day. It's bad for your liver. And she had gone to the doctor and complained about how she felt. And then the doctor said, oh, you're just old. And that just infuriated her. So I spent the 3 days with her, and this was in March, and she had fallen and broken her hip in January. And, when a person that old falls down and breaks something, it's usually downhill from there. But, I mean, my mom was pretty tough, and she went through the rehab. She got the surgery. She didn't need a full hip replacement. She just needed the ball of the hip replaced, and they did that, and she actually went through the rehab, and she could walk a little bit with a walker and stuff, but she really couldn't really walk very much, and she was getting bed sores. And I got her one of those pillows to sit on, like a donut pillow to sit on, and she said that helped. And I would always give her Reiki when I was there. The other thing was, when I was giving her Reiki, she was complaining that she couldn't feel the heat of my Reiki hands. And I thought, well, is there something wrong with me? But I knew there wasn't, because I'm doing this for a living. I'm doing Reiki. I've been doing Reiki every day for 20 years. Actually, more like 25 years. But I think that she was just already kind of leaving her body at that point. And, she was really done. And I knew that I had been visiting her for like the last 2 years. I knew that every time I went to visit her, it could be the last time I ever saw her. And we always had a good time together, too. I mean, we had a good relationship, and she really appreciated me, and I appreciated her. And we always had this close bond. And I remembered at least one other life when we were actually married, and I was the wife and she was the husband. But so this is about 3 weeks later. I'm at TJ's place hanging out, and it's a Sunday, and I have an angelic with light session Sunday night. We get a phone call, and it's a nurse at the facility, and she's saying, you have to get down here. Your mom's not going to last much longer. And there was no way that I could get down there. I mean, I don't even own a car. I live in New York City. I would have had to rent a car, and then it was like, it would have taken me about 3 hours to rent a car, to get ready, to pack, to get down there. And my younger sister was already on her way up from Washington, D.C., actually Silver Springs, which is, right outside of Washington, D.C. And my sister didn't get there in time. But, I'm talking to TJ. I said, listen, I have like a couple hundred people signed up for this session, and I got my students all, I'm just going to have to, the show must go on. And, TJ said, why don't you talk to your mom? And so I said, yeah, I'm just going to talk to her. I said, hey, Mom, this is Jordy. I just want you to know it's okay for you to leave. You're going to be fine. And I had been telling her this for years. I said, Mom, you don't really die when your body dies, right? And she was like, well, she wasn't really sure. she I talked to her and I said, listen, it's okay to leave your body. You're done here. You haven't had quality of life for quite a while. You're always saying, why am I still alive? I ran out of all my money and blah blah blah. And so I talked to her, and 20 minutes later I got the call, and they said, well, she passed, and 3 of her best friends in the facility were with her. And I just felt relief. And over the next couple of days, I posted on Facebook. I told all my friends, and everybody's like, "Are you okay? Let me know if you need to talk or so." And I didn't really. I was not grieving because I was happy that she had died in a way that I'd always prayed that she would die in quickly without a lot of long drawn out suffering. There was the only thing that she was dealing with was that she was tired of living. She didn't have any chronic disease. She was on hardly any medication, and she was just done, and her body was getting more and more frail. And so I was really happy that she had a quick, easy death. And then, a couple hours later, I'm starting the Angelic World Light session. And those sessions always start with the 30-minute conference call, and I'm just doing the rap that I do in the conference call, and then we say the prayers, and then we start the session, and this was last year. I mean, over the last couple of years, my A team, I call it my angel team, that's my students that co-channel with me. It's just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, and there was like 14 of us that day, or I don't remember actually, but there's more, somewhere between 10 and 15 of my students channeling with me. And I just love doing those sessions. It's really like my favorite thing to do in any given, we do them every 2 weeks for the full moon and the new moon. And it's a big deal to me because we get to help so many people. It's gotten so we have between 300 and 400 people on the list, and like about 170 or 80 pets are on the list. And my students get to channel with me, and we all get treated too. I mean, we all get an amazing treatment. But so I start channeling, and about 5 minutes into the channeling, 5 or 10 minutes, my mom pops into the session, and I see her face clearly in front of me, and she looks like she's 30 years old, and she has this huge smile on her face. I was like, "Hi, Mom," and she's just smiling, and I know that she just wanted to let me know that, like, this is great here. I'm doing fine. I love it. And of course, there's no suffering in the spirit world, And then she's with all her family that had already passed, and all her brothers and sisters and best friends she outlived all of them. She was 103 when she died. So I just wanted to share that because that was I do have psychic abilities, and she did too. And I'll share, an incident that happened, and this was when I was still in high school and I had a summer job, and it was Paul Garrity and I, and was there a third person? I think it was just Paul and I and Greg Granquist, who was the manager of our band. Well, he wasn't really the manager of our band, but he was social committee chairman at Drew University, and he had gotten this gig, and he said, "You guys want to make some money?" And we were out in Burnsville. Well, it wasn't Burnsville, but we were doing like yard work in, I think it was a school or something, and just like cleaning up like dead branches and mowing the lawn and stuff like that. And we were done, and it was time to go home. We got in Greg's car, and he's driving down the road. This is in rural New Jersey, and it was in the summer too. But this bee flies into the car, and while he's driving, he's like swatting at the bee and trying to get it out through the windows are open. He's trying to get the bee out, and then he clips a parked car, and he has to stop because he's damaged his car and he's damaged the car, and so we're stuck there for and the police come and everything. They fill out an accident report, blah blah blah. And finally I get home, and when I get home, I'm late for dinner, and my mom says, "Oh, I was so worried about you. I saw that you had an accident," and she actually clairvoyantly saw the whole scene with the car and Paul and Greg and I and everything, And I said, Mom, I'm fine. None of us got injured at all. But that, my mom has had Pluto in the 12th house conjunct her ascendant, which actually makes her very Plutonian. And she would have premonitions, and she had a very strong sixth sense. She did not identify as a psychic, though, but she would, especially in crisis situations, her sensing would kick in, her intuition, and she'd just know or see what was going on. And my mom was a really amazing person. She was a nurse, and she was born in 1922, so she grew up in the Great Depression. And then she was a nurse in World War II in the Army, and she was stationed in India. But she was an anesthetist. And, now my generation, the baby boom generation, and I call it the hippie generation because I still am a hardcore hippie, basically. But, we had it really good. But, my mom told me stories about, like, if you could get, like, one pair of new shoes, you'd have a pair of shoes and it'd be your only pair of shoes, and you'd wear them for, like, 5 years, for years until they just were falling apart. And and she, her parents were doctors. They were not dirt poor, but it was during the Great Depression, and the economy had been totally ruined by these, I call them the banksters. This is all rigged, and they got rich as all hell, and everybody else suffered. But huge scam with the, now I know what these bankers are really about, but it's not a pretty picture, and but that's all changing now. But I feel incredibly fortunate to have come out of her womb and to have my father and my mother as basically really good role models. They were people of integrity with good values, and a lot of my healing juju I really got from my mom. I do have a strong feminine side, and I do identify as an intuitive empath or a psychic, and that's something that once I got in recovery from drug addiction, those abilities had been suppressed underneath the addiction, and then I was able to blossom. And the Reiki training really just like changed my life in incredibly beautiful ways. But I know that both my mom and dad are proud of me now, that clean and sober for 23 years, and that like my mom, I've been able to help a lot of people. And she ran family planning clinics which were free clinics in New Jersey, and her patients loved her. She would get Christmas cards from them, and she had a great sense of humor. She was a great storyteller. She's a Capricorn, and just a great lady. Very well read, very knowledgeable, and always had that benevolence in her soul of, like, she just wanted to help people that were suffering, and I got that from her. And my dad was basically had an indigenous soul, and we had a canoe, and he was literally like a Native American, but he had a very successful career as a marine engineer and wrote 200 scientific papers. He was basically like a brainiac, a very old soul, and I have the very old soul thing too. But super grateful to be to come out of that woman's womb, and to be able to have a really fantastic life, and I've had horrific struggles in my life, and my parents, they didn't get along. They had communication problems, but they stuck together, and they made sure that we had everything we needed, and that they were good role models for us in many ways. So anyway, that's enough for now, and I hope you enjoyed what I've shared, and I love you all, and hope you can join the next Angelic with Light session, which is Friday night this week, the 17th, for the new moon in Aries, and lots of good new things happening in my life, and it's kind of it's been challenging to navigate with what I'm going through now, but it's all good, and I am super grateful that it's springtime and that it was up in the 80s today. I was able to go out and shoot baskets and with the t-shirt and shorts, and I'm a happy camper. Huge love and gratitude to everybody. Namaste, and take good care, and don't worry.